I'm Isabella Sullivan, a woman who once lived in a luxurious glass tower in Manhattan, until the day I discovered that my husband and my best friend had betrayed me, and that the truth about the child I was carrying was part of a scheme planned years in advance. He looked me straight in the eye, smiled coldly, and said, "This isn't over." And in that very moment, I knew I had to fight with everything I had to protect my son and myself. Before I share my full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit like and subscribe if you've ever overcome an impossible challenge for your family. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my husband laugh with my best friend across the crowded ballroom. Not the polite, measured laugh he reserved for donors at these Manhattan fundraisers, but something genuine, unguarded, something I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Isabella, darling, your exhibition was simply divine," Margaret Whitman gushed beside me, her diamonds catching the light from the Met's crystal chandeliers. I forced my attention back to her, away from Nathaniel and Lena huddled by the Monet reproduction. "Thank you," I managed, though the words felt like sandpaper in my throat. The emerging artists were thrilled to showcase here. 72 floors above the city, our penthouse waited, all glass and steel and empty spaces that echoed. When Nathaniel had first shown it to me 5 years ago, I'd gasped at the view, at the way Manhattan spread beneath us like a glittering promise. Now those floor-to-ceiling windows felt like a cage, transparent walls that let the world see in while keeping me trapped inside. "Izzy!" Lena's voice cut through my thoughts. She appeared at my elbow, her hand warm on my bare arm. "You look pale. Have you eaten?" I hadn't. The smell of the catered hors d'oeuvres made my stomach turn, though I couldn't tell if it was anxiety or something else. Lena's dark eyes searched mine with what looked like genuine concern, and for a moment, I wanted to collapse into her, to tell her everything. How Nathaniel came home later each night, how his kisses had become perfunctory pecks, how I'd started sleeping on the far edge of our California king bed just to avoid the rejection of reaching for him. "I'm fine," I lied, just as my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me glance down. He's not just laughing with her. The room tilted. I gripped Lena's arm to steady myself, and she immediately steered me toward the ladies' room, away from the crowd. "What is it?" she asked once we were alone among the marble and gold fixtures. I showed her the text, watched her face darken. "Some sick joke," she said firmly. "You know how people are, jealous of what you and Nathaniel have." What we had. Past tense felt more accurate, though I didn't say it. Nathaniel found us 20 minutes later, his tie slightly askew. "There you are. The Hendersons want to discuss funding the spring gala." His gray eyes, which had once made me feel like I was drowning in the best way, barely met mine. "You coming?" I followed him back into the fray, Lena's hand protective on my lower back. Nathaniel walked 3 steps ahead, already checking his phone, probably calculating market futures or whatever consumed his brilliant mind these days. Once, he would have taken my hand, would have whispered jokes about the pretentious art critics in my ear. The Hendersons droned on about tax write-offs while I smiled and nodded, playing the perfect wife of the tech finance mogul. Inside, that text burned like acid. I watched Nathaniel work the room, noticed how his gaze kept drifting to where Lena chatted with the museum director. When had she become so comfortable in our world? When had I become a stranger in it? The rest of the evening blurred together. Air kisses, empty compliments, discussions about art I'd once been passionate about but now felt hollow. Nathaniel's hand occasionally touched my elbow, guiding me from one conversation to another, but it was mechanical, like maneuvering a chess piece. In the town car heading home, I stared at his profile illuminated by passing streetlights. "Good evening," he said without looking up from his tablet. "The Henderson donation will cover the venue." "Nathaniel," I started, then stopped. What could I say? That I missed him? That I felt like a ghost in my own marriage? That I'd noticed how he smiled at my best friend? "Hmm?" Still not looking. Nothing. Just tired." He nodded, already lost in spreadsheets and projections. Outside, Manhattan glittered with its false promises, and I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, wondering when exactly I'd become invisible to the man I'd built my life around. The text still glowed on my phone screen, unopened since the bathroom. I didn't know then that this was the last night I'd pretend everything was fine. The last night before the glass shattered completely. 3 weeks later, I held the pregnancy test with shaking hands, two pink lines staring back at me like an answered prayer. After 4 years of trying, of specialists and treatments that Nathaniel had written checks for with increasing impatience, here it was. Life. Growing inside me despite everything. I spent the day planning how to tell him. Bought his favorite wine, a Chateau Margaux 2010 we'd shared on our wedding night. Set the dining table with the good china we never used. Even wore the black dress he'd bought me in Paris, back when he still noticed what I wore. He came home late, of course. 10:30, tie loosened, eyes already distant. But he'd won the Masrich account that day, a deal worth hundreds of millions. Surely this was the right moment. "Darling," I said, meeting him in the foyer. "Congratulations on Masrich. I have champagne chilling." He glanced at me, a flicker of something surprise crossing his face. "You heard about that?" "Lena told me." She'd been coming by more often lately, checking on me when Nathaniel worked late. "I'm so proud of you." We sat at the dining table, crystal gleaming in the candlelight. I poured his wine, my own glass remaining empty. He noticed. "Not drinking?" This was it. I pulled the ultrasound photo from beneath my napkin, slid it across the mahogany. "Because of this." He stared at the grainy image for so long I started to speak, to fill the silence, but then he looked up. His face was stone. "You're sure?" Not "we're having a baby." Not "I love you." Just cold calculation. 8 weeks, I whispered. "I saw Dr. Morrison yesterday." He pushed back from the table, stood. "I need some air." "Nathaniel." "I said I need air, Isabella." The door slammed behind him. I sat there in my Paris dress, watching the candles flicker, the ultrasound photo between us like evidence of a crime. The wine turned to vinegar on my tongue. He didn't come home that night, or the next. His phone went straight to voicemail. His assistant claimed he was in back-to-back meetings. By the second evening, I was frantic. That's when Lena showed up with takeout and her overnight bag. "That bastard," she muttered, holding me while I sobbed into her designer blouse. "How dare he just disappear?" She stayed in the guest room, made me eat, reminded me to take my prenatal vitamins. I was grateful for her presence, even as something nagged at me. How had she known to come? I hadn't told anyone about Nathaniel leaving. On the third morning, another text from an unknown number. "Westbridge Hotel, room 1702, if you want to know where your husband goes." I showed Lena. Her face went white, then red with anger. "Let me go," she said. "You shouldn't see whatever, just let me check." I agreed, too exhausted to argue. She left with promises to call immediately. An hour passed, then 2. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I threw on jeans and a sweater, ignored the morning sickness clawing at my throat, and took a cab to the Westbridge. The lobby was all marble and discretion, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. The elevator ride to the 17th floor lasted forever. I walked down the hushed hallway, my sneakers silent on the thick carpet. Room 1702 was at the end, door slightly ajar. I raised my hand to knock, then heard it. Lena's laugh, low and intimate. "We can't keep doing this," she was saying. "Izzy's my best friend." "You didn't seem to mind last night." Nathaniel's voice, warm in a way I hadn't heard in months. The world tilted. I pushed the door open, saw them tangled in sheets that probably cost more than most people's rent. They turned in slow motion, Lena's face shifting from satisfaction to horror, Nathaniel's expression never changing from that cold calculation. I ran. Down the hallway, past the elevator, found the stairs. 17 flights down, my vision blurring, my chest burning. In the lobby, I collided with someone solid. "Mrs. Cross?" The man steadied me, his face concerned behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Mark Chen. We need to talk about your husband." He pressed a manila folder into my hands. If you want to survive what's coming, read this. He's more dangerous than you know. I clutched the folder and stumbled out into the noon sun, my perfect life in ashes behind me. I made it 3 blocks before my legs gave out. A coffee shop materialized, one of those cozy Brooklyn places with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh ground beans. The barista took one look at my face and brought me water without asking. With shaking hands, I opened Mark Chen's folder. Financial documents swam before my eyes. Offshore accounts, shell companies, a web of transactions that all led back to Cross Technologies. And there, at the bottom of a contract dated 6 months ago, Nathaniel's signature next to Lena's. Not just business partners, co-conspirators. Money laundering? I whispered, the words foreign on my tongue. My phone exploded with texts. Nathaniel, we need to talk. Lena, Izzy, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Please answer. I turned it off. The barista, a girl with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers, refilled my water. You okay, hun? No, I said, surprising myself with honesty. But I will be. I spent the next 3 hours in that cafe reading every document twice. Mark Chen had been thorough. 3 years of investigation laid out like a roadmap to my husband's crimes. The legitimate business was a front. The charity galas? Washing dirty money through donations? Every glittering party I'd hosted, every smile I'd worn, every hand I'd shaken. I'd been complicit without knowing. The baby moved inside me. Too early to really feel, but I swore I did. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry you're coming into this mess. When I finally emerged, the sun was setting. I couldn't go home, couldn't face that glass tower where every surface would reflect my stupidity back at me. Instead, I checked into a small hotel in Greenwich Village, paid cash, and collapsed fully clothed on the bed. The phone rang at midnight. Unknown number, but I answered, desperate for something, anything, to make sense of this. Isabella? The voice was familiar, but unexpected. It's Ethan Cross. Nathaniel's half-brother. I'd met him exactly twice, at our wedding, where he'd been coldly polite, and at a family funeral where he'd avoided everyone, especially Nathaniel. I heard, he said simply. About the hotel. About the investigation. Are you safe? How did you... Mark Chen contacted me weeks ago. I've been debating whether to warn you. A pause. I'm in Oregon, teaching at the university here. You need somewhere to go, somewhere Nathaniel won't think to look. My door's open. Oregon. 3,000 miles from everything I'd built and lost. It sounded like another planet. Why would you help me? Because I know what my family is capable of, Ethan said quietly. And because once, a long time ago, you showed me kindness when no one else would. I didn't remember, but I was too tired to ask. I'm pregnant. All the more reason to get somewhere safe. There's a red eye from JFK at 2 a.m. I'll meet you in Portland. After hanging up, I sat in that anonymous hotel room and made a list. What to take, what to leave. 5 years of marriage reduced to logistics. I'd need clothes, documents, the jewelry I could sell. Everything else, the art I'd collected, the life I'd curated, was just props in a play I no longer understood. I took a cab back to the penthouse at 11 p.m., knowing Nathaniel's habits, knowing he'd be at the office or with her. The doorman nodded like always, no idea my world had imploded. The elevator ride felt like ascending to my own execution. The apartment was dark, empty. I moved quickly, filling a suitcase with essentials. In his study, I found more. Documents he'd hidden poorly, evidence of things Mark Chen had only guessed at. I photographed everything. In our bedroom. Was it ever really ours? I left my wedding rings on his pillow. The engagement diamond caught the city lights, throwing rainbows on the wall. I'd loved that ring once, loved what it represented. Now it was just another pretty lie. I paused at the door, looking back at the space I'd tried so hard to make a home. The neutral colors Nathaniel preferred, the minimal art he tolerated, the silence he cultivated. I'd made myself small to fit into his life, and still it hadn't been enough. The cab to JFK drove through empty streets, Manhattan glittering one last time in my rearview mirror. At the airport, I bought my ticket with cash, my hands steady now. The baby fluttered again. Definitely real this time. We're going on an adventure, I told my belly, settling into the departure lounge. Just you and me. But that wasn't quite true. Somewhere in Oregon, a man I barely knew was waiting to offer shelter. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had 3 hours ago. Ethan looked nothing like his half-brother. Where Nathaniel was sharp angles and calculated charm, Ethan was all quiet warmth. Soft brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, flannel shirt, hands that looked like they knew honest work. He found me at baggage claim, took in my swollen eyes and wrinkled clothes without comment. "You came," he said simply. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." He drove a battered Subaru that smelled like coffee and sea salt. The Oregon coast materialized in the dawn light, nothing like the Hamptons where Nathaniel had insisted we summer. This was wild, untamed, real. His house sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, all weathered wood and large windows. Inside, it was everything the penthouse wasn't. Books everywhere, mismatched furniture, a kitchen that looked actually used. "Guest rooms upstairs," he said, carrying my suitcase. "Bathrooms across the hall. You're safe here, Isabella." I broke down then, sobbing into my hands while this near stranger made tea and didn't try to fix anything. When I finally stopped, he handed me a mug and sat across the worn kitchen table. "I should tell you," he said carefully, "why I really left New York." The story came in pieces. The Cross family fortune built on darker foundations than I'd imagined. Ethan discovering the truth at 25, refusing to be part of it. Nathaniel choosing differently, choosing to expand what their father had started. He was always better at compartmentalizing, Ethan said. Could smile at dinner while destroying someone's life in the afternoon. I couldn't. "So you walked away from everything?" "From the money, yes. The family name, but I took something with me." He smiled sadly. "My soul, I guess. Cliché as that sounds." I thought of all the galas, the charity boards, the carefully curated life I'd built on blood money. I didn't know. How did I not know? Because Nathaniel's very good at what he does. And because you loved him. Loved. Past tense. When had that changed? Mark Chen called that afternoon. "You need to keep those photos you took. The FBI's building a case, but they need more. Are you willing to testify?" "I'm pregnant," I said, as if that excused cowardice. "All the more reason to make sure he can't hurt you or the baby. Think about it." Ethan made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but I ate like I hadn't in weeks. We sat on his deck afterward, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. The silence was comfortable, unlike the charged quiet of the penthouse. "Can I tell you something strange?" I said. "I feel more myself here, in this strange place with you, than I have in years." He looked at me for a long moment. "That's not strange. That's just truth finally having room to breathe." Days passed, in a rhythm I'd forgotten existed. Morning, walks on the beach. Afternoon naps without guilt. Evenings, reading by the fireplace. Ethan went to teach his classes, came home with groceries and updates from Mark Chen. The investigation was accelerating. Nathaniel was getting desperate. "He's hired investigators," Ethan told me one evening. "Looking for you." "Will they find me?" "Not here. I'm the last person he'd expect you to run to." He paused. "We've never been brothers, really. Just two people who happen to share a father?" "What happened between you? Really?" Ethan was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "You happened." My heart stopped. "What?" "The rehearsal dinner, before your wedding. You were on the terrace, crying. You just found out your mother wouldn't be coming. I found you there, and we talked for hours. About art, about dreams, about everything except the fact that you were marrying my brother the next day." Memory flooded back. That night. The only time I'd doubted marrying Nathaniel, and Ethan had been there, listening without judgment, making me laugh through tears. "You kissed me," I whispered, "just before dawn. Once. And you chose him anyway." No bitterness in his voice, just fact. I understood. He could give you the world. I just had a teaching position and a conscience. Ethan, I'm not telling you this to complicate things, just to explain why I'm helping. That night, I saw who you really were, before he changed you, before you learned to make yourself small. He stood. That person deserves a chance to exist again. I sat on that deck long after he went inside, hand on my growing belly, watching stars I hadn't seen in years. The city had hidden them, like it had hidden so much else. But here, 3,000 miles from my collapsed life, they were brilliant and clear and infinite with possibility. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday. Ethan found me throwing up in the bathroom. Morning sickness had become all-day sickness, and silently held my hair back. When I emerged, shaky and embarrassed, the FedEx envelope waited on the kitchen table like a coiled snake. "You don't have to open it now," he said. But I did. Needed to see what fresh hell Nathaniel had devised. My hands shook as I read, then read again, certain I'd misunderstood. "He's filing for full custody," I said numbly, "of a baby that isn't even born yet, claiming I'm mentally unstable, that I abandoned my life, that I'm living with a man who isn't my husband." Ethan's face darkened. "That manipulative—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "Sorry." "Don't be. He is." I kept reading. "He's frozen our accounts, all of them, even the one in my maiden name." "How is that legal?" "Legal doesn't matter when you have his lawyers." I laughed, sharp and bitter. God, I've been so stupid. He isolated me from everyone except Lena, and she— The betrayal hit fresh, stealing my breath. My best friend, the person I'd trusted most after my husband. How long had they been laughing at me behind my back? "You need a lawyer," Ethan said. "A good one." "With what money?" "I have savings." "No." The word came out harder than intended. "I won't drag you down with me. You've done enough." He looked at me steadily. "Isabella, I offered my help freely. Let me give it the same way." Mark Chen had a recommendation. Carmen Vasquez, a lawyer who specialized in taking down wealthy men who thought laws were suggestions. She drove up from Portland that weekend, all sharp suits and sharper mind. "He's using intimidation tactics," she said, reviewing the papers. "Classic narcissistic abuse pattern, but we have advantages. The financial crimes, for one. Hard to claim moral superiority from a federal prison." "What if he doesn't go to prison?" "Then we make sure he loses what he values most: control." She smiled, predatory. "Men like your husband always overplay their hands. We just have to wait for it." We didn't wait long. Lena called that night, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Izzy, please. I'm so sorry. He said he loved me. Said he was leaving you anyway. I was weak and stupid and—" I hung up, called back. Hung up again. The fourth time, Ethan answered my phone. "She's not interested," he said calmly. "Stop calling." But I grabbed the phone back. "Wait, Lena, what did you mean he was leaving me anyway?" "He had it all planned," she sobbed. "The pregnancy was just an inconvenience. He showed me documents, transfers he'd been making. Said you'd never prove anything, that I'd be set for life if I just—" She broke off. "I'm so sorry, he played us both." "Are you willing to testify to that?" Silence, then small. "He'll destroy me." "He's already destroyed you. The only question is whether you let him destroy me too." I thought of the baby, of the future I needed to build. "Please, Lena, you owe me this much." She agreed, eventually. Carmen was thrilled. A hostile witness flipping? That's gold. The days blurred together. Legal meetings, FBI interviews, doctor's appointments where Ethan held my hand during ultrasounds because I couldn't bear to be alone. The baby was healthy, growing, oblivious to the war being waged over its future. "It's a boy," the technician said during the 20-week scan. I cried then, really cried, because I'd wanted to share this moment with my husband. Despite everything, that dream died hard. Ethan drove me home in silence, let me grieve what should have been. That night, he made hot chocolate and we sat by the fire, not talking, just being. The baby kicked strong and sure, and I grabbed Ethan's hand, placed it on my belly. "Feel that?" His face transformed with wonder. "He's really in there. He's really in there." We stayed like that, his hand warm on my bump until the fire died to embers. Something shifted between us in that quiet moment. Something I wasn't ready to name. but for the first time in months, I felt less alone. "We're going to win," Ethan said softly. "You know that, right?" "How can you be sure?" "Because you're stronger than he ever imagined. And because now you're not fighting alone." The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more pain. But tonight, in this simple house by the sea, I had exactly what I needed: safety, support, and the growing certainty that I could survive this, that we could survive this. Labor started at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, 2 weeks early, because of course this baby would have his own timeline. Ethan drove through empty coastal roads while I gripped the door handle and tried to remember how to breathe. "Almost there," he kept saying. "You're doing great." At the hospital, everything moved fast. Too fast. The nurse's face changed when she checked my ID. "Mrs. Cross, we have a note here." "What kind of note?" Ethan demanded. Before she could answer, Nathaniel walked in. Armani suit at 4 a.m., lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. My heart monitor spiked. "Get out," I gasped between contractions. "I have rights," he said coldly. "This is my child, too." "So, your child?" The laugh that escaped me was wild. "You couldn't even pretend to be happy when I told you." "Hormones," he told the nurse. "She's been unstable throughout the pregnancy. I'm concerned for the baby's safety." Ethan stepped between us. "You need to leave, now." "Or what, little brother? You'll hit me? Please do. My lawyers would love that." Another contraction hit, stealing my words. But Carmen burst in then, hair wild, injunction papers in hand. "Mr. Cross, you're in violation of the restraining order filed yesterday. Leave, or I'll have security escort you out." "What restraining order? I wasn't served." "Check with your lawyers. I'm sure they received it." She smiled sweetly. "Now get out before you add witness intimidation to your charges." He left, but not before leaning close enough to whisper, "This isn't over." The next hours blurred. Pain and pushing and Ethan's voice anchoring me when I wanted to drift away. Then suddenly, a cry. My son, perfect and furious and mine. "He's beautiful," Ethan breathed, and I realized he was crying. They placed the baby on my chest, and the world narrowed to his tiny face, his grasping fingers, the weight of him real and solid and here. Noah, I decided. After my grandfather, the only man who'd never let me down. That's when Nathaniel returned with a court order. "Mandatory paternity test," his lawyer announced, "to establish parental rights." I looked at my hours-old son, then at Nathaniel's cold face, and felt something inside me break. Or maybe finally heal. "Fine," I said. "Test away." Carmen tried to object, but I was tired of fighting. Let him have his test. Let him face what I'd suspected since that night in Oregon, when Ethan told me about our kiss, our connection. The night before my wedding, when I'd been happy. The last time I'd been myself. They took the samples. Noah screamed at the needle stick, and I wanted to murder everyone in the room. Ethan held my hand so tight it hurt, but I needed the anchor. "Results in 24 hours, the technician said. Nathaniel smirked. "I'll wait." But Mark Chen arrived then, FBI badge flashing. "Actually, Mr. Cross, you'll be coming with us. We have some questions about your offshore accounts." The smirk faltered. "This is harassment. My lawyers are welcome to meet us at the federal building." Mark nodded to me. "Ma'am, congratulations on your son." They led Nathaniel away in handcuffs, past the nursery window where other families were celebrating new life. Poetic justice, maybe, or just the inevitable conclusion of a man who thought he was untouchable. The next 24 hours crawled. I fed Noah, slept fitfully, avoided thinking about what the test would show. Ethan never left, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair, fetching ice chips and decent coffee. "Whatever happens," he said that evening, Noah sleeping between us. "I'm here, if you want me to be." What if I couldn't finish? Doesn't matter, I've loved this baby since the first time I felt him kick. Biology doesn't change that. The doctor arrived the next morning with results. I made everyone leave except Ethan. Needed him there for whatever came next. "Mrs. Cross," the doctor said gently, The test shows that your husband is not the biological father. The room spun. I heard Ethan's sharp intake of breath, felt his hand find mine. However, the doctor continued, there's something unusual. The baby's DNA shows markers consistent with the cross-family line, just not your husband's direct lineage. I looked at Ethan, saw my own shock reflected in his eyes. That night, that single kiss. But we'd never... That's impossible, I whispered. Ethan and I we never... The doctor looked uncomfortable. There's one other possibility. Has your husband ever had access to genetic material from family members? For medical procedures, perhaps? The world tilted again as understanding dawned. Nathaniel's obsession with control, his knowledge of that long-ago kiss, his cold reaction to my pregnancy. He'd known. Somehow he'd known. And he'd used it as one more weapon in his arsenal of manipulation. Oh my God, I breathed. What did he do? The truth was worse than I'd imagined. Mark Chen laid it out in the hospital conference room while Noah slept in my arms, oblivious to the storm around him. 3 years ago, Ethan was tested as a potential bone marrow donor for your father-in-law, Mark explained. Nathaniel had access to those medical records, to the stored samples. That's insane, Ethan said flatly. Even for him. We found the fertility clinic records, Carmen added. Forged consent forms. He's been planning this for years, Isabella, since before the wedding, possibly. I thought I might be sick. Why? Why would he do something so twisted? Control, Mark said simply. He knew about your connection to Ethan. Saw you as a threat to the family empire if you ever allied with his brother. So he bound you to both of them, permanently. The perfect trap, I whispered. If I left him, I'd be leaving with his brother's child. The scandal would destroy all of us. Except he didn't count on getting caught for the financial crimes, Carmen smiled grimly. Or on you being stronger than he calculated. Ethan hadn't spoken in minutes. When I looked at him, his face was marble. Ethan? I need air, he said quietly and left. I found him on the hospital's roof garden an hour later, after I'd settled Noah with the nurses. He stood at the railing, staring at nothing. I'm sorry, I said. For what? None of this is your fault. For dragging you into this. I gestured helplessly. Everything. He turned then, and the pain in his eyes took my breath. Do you know what the worst part is? I meant what I said yesterday. I already love that baby. But now I don't know if it's real or just biology tricking me into feeling connected to my actual son. Ethan, and you. His voice broke. These past months, I thought we were building something real. But what if it's just proximity and hormones and shared trauma? What if Nathaniel wins in the end by making us doubt everything? I moved closer, placed my hand over his heart. What do you feel right now? Terrified, he admitted. Furious, protective. Like I want to build a wall around you and Noah and never let the world hurt you again. That's not biology, I said. That's choice. That's love. He covered my hand with his, and we stood there while the world spun below us. When he kissed me, it was nothing like that night 5 years ago. This was deeper, surer, born of knowing each other's broken pieces and choosing to hold them carefully. I love you, he said against my lips. Not because of Noah, not because of Nathaniel, in spite of all that. I love you too, I whispered, and meant it. When we returned to the room, Carmen was pacing, phone pressed to her ear. She hung up, grinning. They got him. FBI raided his offices and home simultaneously. Lena's turning state's evidence. The whole house of cards is coming down. What about Noah? I asked. The custody? What custody case? A man facing 20 to life for money laundering and genetic fraud doesn't get to raise children. She squeezed my shoulder. It's over, Isabella. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. The news broke that evening. Every channel, every website. Tech moguls fall from grace. The billionaire's twisted game. Cross-technology scandal rocks Wall Street. My phone exploded with calls I didn't answer. Everyone who disappeared when I needed them now wanted to check on me, to get the inside story, to align themselves with the victim instead of the perpetrator. You should give a statement, Carmen advised. Control the narrative. Instead, I turned off my phone and focused on what mattered. Noah, who didn't care about scandals or DNA tests, who just wanted to be held and fed and loved. Ethan, who changed diapers with the same careful attention he gave to his lectures. The three of us, building something new from the ashes of what had burned. Nathaniel's family tried to buy my silence. His father, cold as his son, offered millions to sign an NDA to pretend none of this had happened. I want nothing from any of you, I told him, except to never see you again. You're making a mistake. The cross name still carries power. Then I'm grateful my son will never carry it. Ethan officially adopted Noah 6 months later, in a small courthouse ceremony with only Carmen and Mark as witnesses. I'd legally returned to my maiden name by then, shedding the last connection to that glass tower life. Noah Ethan Sullivan, the judge proclaimed, and our son gurgled happily, like he approved of losing the cross curse. That night, in our house by the sea, I stood at the window watching storms roll in off the Pacific. Ethan wrapped his arms around me from behind, Noah sleeping peacefully in his crib nearby. Any regrets? He asked. I thought of the penthouse, the galas, the hollow perfection I'd traded for this simple real life. Only that it took me so long to find my way here. Lightning illuminated the sky, beautiful and dangerous and free. Like the truth, I thought. Like the future we were building on foundations of honesty instead of lies. 2 years later, my gallery opening in Portland drew a modest crowd. Not the glittering Manhattan elite I'd once courted, but real people who came for the art, not the networking. My photographs lined the walls, a series I'd called After the Storm. Landscapes of the Oregon coast, but really about weathering devastation and finding beauty in the aftermath. "Mama, up!" Noah demanded, and I lifted him onto my hip. He'd inherited Ethan's eyes, but my stubbornness, a combination that kept us constantly amazed and exhausted. "The red one's mine," he announced to a patron, pointing at an abstract piece he'd finger-painted last week that I'd hung in the children's section. "A family of artists," the woman smiled. "How wonderful." Ethan appeared with champagne for the guests, juice for Noah. He'd taken the semester off from teaching to help launch the gallery, our shared dream made real. We'd married quietly last spring, just us and Noah on the beach where I'd first felt safe again. "Someone's looking for you," he said quietly, "by the seascapes." I made my way over, Noah still attached to my hip, and stopped short. The woman studying my photographs was older, grayer, but unmistakable. "Mom?" She turned, and I saw myself in 30 years. Same eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of holding herself like she was ready to run. "Isabella!" Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "The photos are beautiful. What are you doing here?" "I saw the news, about the gallery opening." She paused. "About everything else, too." Noah squirmed to get down, and I let him toddle to Ethan, who scooped him up with practiced ease. My husband caught my eye, questioning. I nodded. "I'm okay." "It's been 18 years, I said. "You left when I was 13. "I know." No word, no explanation, just gone. "I know." We stood there, two women separated by decades of silence and questions I'd never thought I'd get to ask. "Why?" It came out as a whisper. She pulled an envelope from her purse, worn soft with age. "I've carried this for years, trying to find the courage to send it." Inside were documents, contracts, photos of her with a younger Nathaniel's father. "I was his accountant," she said. "I discovered what the Cross Empire was built on. When I tried to leave to take you with me, they threatened—" She stopped, composed herself. "They said they'd take you legally, that I'd never see you again. The only deal they'd make was I disappear completely." "So you chose to abandon me?" "I chose to keep you safe. Or I thought I did." Tears tracked down her face. "Then you married his son, and I couldn't. I tried to warn you, but every attempt was blocked. The prenup you signed had clauses about family contact. I hired Mark Chen to investigate, hoping he'd find something to free you." The world tilted. "You hired Mark?" 3 years ago, when I heard about the engagement." She met my eyes. "I failed you once by leaving. I couldn't fail you again by letting you stay trapped. I thought of that first text at the Met Gala, of Mark's perfect timing, of all the ways I'd been manipulated. But this time, toward freedom instead of captivity. You saved me, I said slowly. From a distance, without me knowing, you saved me. I'm sorry it took so long. Sorry for all of it. Noah ran back, clutching one of Ethan's teaching awards he'd found somewhere. Grammy? He asked, looking between us with those two smart eyes. My mother's face crumbled. If you'll let me be. I thought of family. The one that had hurt me, the one I'd chosen, the one I was building. All its complicated, messy, imperfect forms. We're having dinner after this, I said. Ethan makes excellent lasagna. She smiled through tears. I'd like that. As the evening wound down, I watched my mother tentatively play with Noah while Ethan chatted with the last guests. The gallery, our gallery, glowed warm against the Portland drizzle. Not the Met, not the penthouse, not any of the glittering stages I'd once thought mattered. But it was real. It was mine. It was ours. Carmen called as we were cleaning up. Thought you'd want to know. Nathaniel got 25 years. No parole for 15. Good, I said, and meant it. Not with vindictiveness, just relief. That chapter was closed. You did it, Isabella. You survived him. After she hung up, I stood in my little gallery, surrounded by art born from pain transformed to purpose. My son's laughter echoed from where Ethan and my mother were teaching him to stack chairs. Tomorrow, there would be challenges. Noah would have questions someday about his biological origins. My mother and I had years of distance to bridge. The gallery might struggle. Life would be beautifully, messily imperfect. But tonight, in this space I'd claimed as my own, with the family I'd chosen and the one that had found its way back, I was exactly where I belonged. Not in a glass tower reaching for an impossible sky, but on solid ground, building something real. The storm had passed. What remained was stronger for having weathered it. Noah ran to me, arms outstretched. Mama, Carrie? I lifted him, held him close, breathed in his little boy smell of finger paint and apple juice. Over his head, I caught Ethan's eye. He smiled, that quiet smile that had become my home. Let's go home, I said. And we did.